Hello, everybody. I am bringing on my colleague Mavis. Give me 1 second. We're going to have a really important discussion. Mavis!
Hey,
Okay,
happy
there you are.
Monday.
Happy Monday! It is Monday, Health Talk Monday. And today we are talking about cortisol. I'm joined here by Mavis from Flow Functional Wellness, and I'm Melanie of Root Tries Wellness. And just briefly going to introduce ourselves. So I empower anxious women over 40 who are experiencing digestive issues to rebalance and rewire their nervous systems, to understand their body's needs, and to move stuck energy, building the foundation for lasting confidence and a healthy gut. So I work with clients with Mavis and also apart from Mavis. And so we have a collaborative relationship, and she does a lot of the testing and interpreting, and then I help people follow through on the treatment plans that Mavis creates. And we also see clients separately. So Mavis, would you like to introduce yourself?
That was a beautiful introduction. Look at you. So my name is Mavis. I'm a functional medicine PA. I work at Flow Functional Wellness, and we work with women, all women 18 and up, to help regulate hormone balance, gut health, detoxification, metabolism, all the things in functional medicine. You really can't do one piece of health without doing all of it. So we do it all.
Wonderful. So we're going to jump into today's topic, which is cortisol. So we're going to talk about hormones today and gut health, and just focus on one today. So that's cortisol. So what is cortisol? Cortisol is a hormone produced by the adrenals, which lie on top of the kidneys. And it's known as the stress hormone because it helps to regulate so many things like our sleep-wake cycles, inflammation. It's involved in energy production, inflammation, response to stress, so much. So we're going to take a deep dive. And Mavis, do you want to add anything to what cortisol is?
Yeah, I just want to say, I feel like cortisol always gets a bad rap, right? I mean, it just always does. But I just want to give it a little bit of love today because we need cortisol to live.
Yeah,
so important. We need it to live. And I think it's important to know that, yes, it does get increased with stress and a bunch of other factors, but it also follows a circadian rhythm. It's part of a natural rhythm in that circadian rhythm. So that's really important to know. And it literally affects everything, and we need it to live. So I just wanted to show it a little bit of love.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, it's involved in regulation. And so the issue is when it becomes out of balance, not that it's a bad hormone. So yeah, I really love that. Let's dive into what some symptoms of high and low cortisol are and how you can know, right? So with high cortisol, oftentimes causes will be things like having too much caffeine, not having a good sleep routine, could be over exercising. Actually, people don't know that. Breathing improperly while you're exercising. I really do feel like there's also a connection between sleep apnea too, because you're struggling to get air right at night, which can raise your blood pressure, which is another sign, I would say, or a sign of high cortisol. So also having issues like with mid-belly weight gain, where you're exercising, you're eating healthy, and you just can't lose the weight, even so. So that's like another sign. Brain fog, we love brain fog. It's like involved in so much of the issues out there. Brain fog, fatigue, anxiety, you got a whole bunch of stress. Frequent infections, insomnia, sugar cravings, these are all high cortisol. Is there anything else you want to add, Mavis, to high cortisol and kind of what you see?
You really hit all the high points, but I do want to just emphasize that fat storage, right? Because think about it, if we are chronically stressed, which a lot of the women that we see are, right, their body is going to be in fight or flight mode, right? They're going to be fighting, right? And so what does the body do? It wants to preserve, it wants to survive. It's not worried about thriving. When the cortisol's up, it's not worried about getting a good night's sleep or digesting your food well or having a baby. It's not worried about that. It's worried about surviving. And so it's going to just store fat, And that's what it's going to do because it's trying to help you. So again, I'm trying to really show cortisol some love today because it really is trying to love us in return and do the best for us. It just doesn't always work with us, especially in this modern time and the way that we live with all of the stress that we have all the time. And then the other thing I wanted to say was when your cortisol is chronically elevated, it affects everything downstream. Well, what is that? That's your thyroid health, that's your sex hormones, that's your libido, that's your bone, brain, heart health, that may cause PMS symptoms, irregular periods, all of the things. So it literally affects every system, downstream from it. And I think you probably mentioned gut, but that's a big one too, right? So
Yeah, I love that. It does affect so much. Insulin sensitivity, which so many people have, and also people experience things like histamine reactions, right? Like allergic kind of reactions where the body's immune system gets overworked and these mast cells release histamine. And again, body trying to protect yourself, but overreacting, right?
right.
And I think there's also people don't understand. So many of my clients, they wake up in the night, right? They don't sleep through the
Yeah.
night and they're like, why am I waking up? Well, I say, what time are you waking up? Oh, it's always like something around three.
Yep. 2 to 4. Yep. 2 to 4
So
all the time.
then I look at TCM and I'm like, okay, TCM, Chinese medicine, and you look at the clock. What's around three? Well, liver. So your liver is getting impacted and alerting you, and not allowing you to have a good night's sleep. And that is involved, connected with cortisol. And there's so much.
Yeah.
And then there's low cortisol. We haven't talked about that. Like what would you see there? So low cortisol, you can have very low blood pressure. You can have adrenal fatigue. And Mavis, can I tell you a personal story about that?
Oh my gosh, please do. Well, we probably have similar stories, but yes, I would love to hear yours.
Okay, so I would love to hear yours too, but mine is basically I had such cortisol disruption, and I wouldn't even call it low cortisol. I would call it like in it was so bad. My blood pressure dropped 60 over 40.
Wow.
Yeah, so my blood pressure can get that low, and it's very scary when that happens because you feel very weak, you feel very tired, your eyes can barely
Right.
open, can barely stay open. And I didn't realize that this is connected to cortisol. And we're going to go in a little bit later detail into a special herb that's helping me with balancing it because I love solutions. But essentially, I did want people to know that you can also have things like blood sugar drops and hypoglycemia symptoms like I was having, which luckily, I have under control now. Like I say, scary low blood pressure, salt cravings. Versus sugar cravings, which usually is high cortisol. You can have things like just your mood is affected, right? Depression, mood disorders, unexpected weight loss, right? That can be involved with, they call it adrenal insufficiency. So when our adrenals are really taxed, can't wait to mention one of the plants that's really helped me. Mavis, do you want to add anything to low cortisol?
Yeah, I think I'll add a couple of things because I want people to understand that you can have low and high cortisol all at the same time. So let me explain a little bit.
Yes.
So, and I'll get into testing in a minute, but a lot of the patients I see, it's pretty classic when someone's in like full quote unquote adrenal burnout, right? When their cortisol is low for the whole day because they miss that natural spike that's in the morning and it's just low all day. And a lot of these patients will come to me and they have the autoimmune stuff. They've got, either chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or depression, or they have no motivation to exercise. And here's a key thing to know if you're suffering with low. When you exercise and do not feel energized, if you feel exhausted after exercising, and I'm not talking about like extreme severe exercise, I'm talking about just like regular exercise. If you do not feel refreshed after that, that could be a sign that you are experiencing low cortisol, right? Mm-hmm. So also just a suppressed immune system, getting sick all the time, those are some kind of things. But keep in mind, you may be high at one point during the day and low at other points of the day. So you may have all of these symptoms, right?
Right.
So, a lot of the times what I'll see is like the circadian rhythm is kind of flipped, right? So kind of like what you're saying, people are spiking in the middle of the night, but then just like low the rest of the day when they're supposed to be spiking shortly after morning, right? So everything can kind of just be all flipped around, and you don't know unless you test. But I kind of just wanted to give people that idea that you could be experiencing all of these. It's not necessarily just one or the other. It could be a combination of both. And it's just kind of like, think about oil and like an engine combustion, right? So the oil, you need that to kind of keep things running smoothly, right? And if the oil is too high, that can cause problems. And if it's too low, that can cause problems. So just kind of think about it like that. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
I love that. Yeah, it's so important to have the regulation. It's really not about, it's just about having it regulated and not having these large spikes or large lows, and you can totally have both at the same time. That's really an important insight into cortisol for sure. So now you're gonna go over some testing. Now I know a lot of people do, or some people, not all people, some people do blood work and get results that their cortisol is actually fine. But they have the symptoms, so that confuses them. Why am I having the symptoms if my blood work is showing I'm fine? So maybe you can go over some different saliva, urine, all the different blood testing, or all the different options for testing and what they can reveal.
Yes, this is super important. So, kind of like going back to what I was saying, cortisol is not doing the same thing throughout the day, right? It follows this natural rhythm. And so it's not going to be the same throughout the day. It's not naturally supposed to be the same throughout the day, right?
Right.
When we wake up in the morning, it's supposed to peak within the first hour after waking. And then as the day goes on, it's supposed to go down because then that allows melatonin to come up, right? So it's all about this delicate balance. So blood work can miss a lot of things, right?
Mm.
And I'm not saying I don't ever use blood work, because sometimes I do, but normally I don't. 99% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing saliva or urine, right? Because the blood work is going to only show us one tiny little spot in time, and it's not going to give us the whole picture. We really need the whole picture to understand what's going on, right? So saliva is a good one to use. And again, you're gonna see the points of your cortisol curve throughout the day. When is it high? When is it low? So it's super important. So I love using saliva tests. But I think my favorite test, though, is the urine Dutch test. I think that's probably my favorite, and I'll tell you why. Not only do you get to see the points throughout the day, but it also tests your metabolites or your metabolism, how you're breaking it down, right?
Mm.
So, a lot of the things I'll see on the Dutch sometimes is whether or not someone has free, low, or high cortisol. I can see how fast or slow they're metabolizing cortisol. And if someone's slowly metabolizing it, it's going to build up in the system, right? And you're going to have high cortisol because your body's not able to metabolize it. And you can see that a lot in people with sluggish liver or hypothyroidism,
Mm-hmm.
malnutrition, things like that. But the urine test is, I think, by far the most valuable, because
Mm-hmm.
not only do you see the points, but you see how your body's metabolizing it.
Nice. Thanks for giving that, yeah, that synopsis. So good for people to think about other testing and not just blood testing when they're looking at cortisol, to get a better picture of what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
also, like little things like sodium levels can tell you, right? Like, is that true?
Oh, yes. So fluid
Yeah,
balance, electrolytes, all of that stuff can give you insight to that as well. Yes.
right. Okay, nice. All right, so now we're going to talk about a special plant
Oh,
that has helped me with my cortisol because I love the plants. So yeah, so we're going to talk about eleuthero. It's an interesting plant because it actually, everybody's unique in their needs, and this plant does not work for everybody because for some people it's too stimulating. So if you have high cortisol, eleuthero could be too stimulating. It could raise your blood pressure too much. So for me, as somebody who has a history of low cortisol and adrenal fatigue, it does wonders for me. It balances, it raises my blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of like having coffee, but without all the negative side effects of coffee. Yeah, because it's a stimulating adaptogen. So it helps us to have a more balanced stress response, but in a more stimulating way. And that's sometimes what you need when you have an adrenal fatigue or burnout kind of issue, which
Right.
has been my story. So Eleuthero is really exciting for me because it works, I love personal stories. It works for me. It helps my blood pressure. And it's sometimes referred to as Siberian ginseng, although it is not a ginseng. And
Oh,
the root is used. It's also warming. I tend to run cold. So it works for me. And I just take Eleuthero powder, Eleutherococcus powder, and I put it in my press. And I sometimes will add some other things to it, like roasted dandelion root or astragalus, which is also good for your immune system. And I will put hot water in there, and I'll add sometimes some monk fruit or some like
mm,
cashew milk, and it's like my coffee. Do you know what I
ah,
mean? So yeah, it works for me. So I just wanted to mention that Eleuthero, and a lot of times you'll see it in adaptogenic blends. It might be combined with other stimulating adaptogens.
right.
You might see something like rhodiola or something like schizandra berry in there. And the thing is, it can be overstimulating, I feel, to have all those together sometimes, and everyone's unique in their needs. For me personally, just sticking to Eleuthero on its own has been what works. So just sharing that. Have you had any experience with Eleuthero?
Yes, so that was actually part of a blend that I used back when I was in, and I always say quote unquote adrenal fatigue, right? I always just use that word burnout. Yeah, so because I've had full blown burnout right in the height of the pandemic. Yeah, it was not pretty, but that herb was part of a blend that I used for probably about 6 months to really kind of help just to stimulate and work on the HPA axis and with all the other modalities I was doing. So yes, I have also benefited from that herb, but it was so beautiful to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, I love the plants. So we're going to move on to our last kind of topic before we let you know how you can continue to get information from us. So we're going to go into practical tips for balance because, we talked about dysregulation of cortisol. So now just talking about how do we balance cortisol? What are some good practices? There's so many, but let's just start with two. So one is like, yeah, you got to have good sleep. People, oh God, the phone. If you're scrolling on Instagram before bed, it's disrupting your circadian rhythms. We all know this. We all know that it's not good to look at your phone first thing when you wake
Yeah.
up and last thing, before you go to bed. We know this. The thing is it's really tempting, and it's more about figuring out how you can, and what I do is I put what is it called? Like, when you can take your iPhone and it's like a turn off thing. What is it called? Downtime. There we go. I have a thing downtime, and so I won't use my phone right before bed because it's on downtime, which makes it more annoying and hard to like go to things. So yeah, it's very important to do that. For exercise wise, everyone's unique in their needs, but I think rebounding is like a really good way, which is basically jumping on a trampoline like a kid.
Yeah.
It's super de-stressing, but yeah, there's tons of different exercises that are great for balancing cortisol. Vagus nerve stimulation, I have a whole training on my website about that you can get, which is all about how to stimulate your digestive system, get your vagus nerve working right, and really get into that rest and digest state. That's really important. And just having balanced meals. People forget about protein, and definitely having balanced meal with good sources of fat, good sources of protein, and
Yeah.
leafy greens, and just whole foods, and balanced meal, because that's going to help regulate your blood sugar. When your blood sugar is regulated, your cortisol, it supports regulating your cortisol.
Yeah.
And then I love qigong. I love energy practices, especially ones that focus on the kidneys, because the adrenals lie on top of the kidneys, and that's just really a good place to nurture. And I can go on and on, but I'm going to give you some time to name a few before we wrap it up. Any
Yeah.
good cortisol tidbits?
So yeah, those are all good. And you're right. There's so many. Some of my favorites, getting sun on your skin first thing when you wake up in the
Yeah.
morning. I think that's so important. Just to kind of reset that circadian rhythm. And you can do that with artificial lighting if you need to, right? But so just kind of resetting that, getting in bed by 10 p.m. I think that is a good goal for everyone. Everybody's a little bit
Oh my
different, but I
God.
think for the adrenal health, that's a good one.
I try to get people in by 11. I can't get people in by 10. This is so, yeah. In an ideal world, 10,
Right.
yes.
I have some patients though that I'm surprised how early they get to bed, and I'm like, "Go you! You're awesome." But yeah, that's the goal, right? And then an Epsom salt bath before bed works wonders,
Yes.
right? The adrenals love magnesium
Yeah.
and a bunch of other things too, but that's one of my favorites. And then also, I just want to mention two things, which people are probably going to hate me for saying this, but caffeine and alcohol.
Yes.
We could talk about that for a whole other lecture, but caffeine literally is not the adrenals friend at all.
Yeah.
And so, everything in moderation, like my grandmother used to say, because she rests in peace. But that's a big one. And alcohol before bed, like so many people might depend on that before bed. And although they think it helps, it's really not helping the body. And that can kind of throw everything off as well. And then the other thing I just want to add in is exercise. I think you kind of alluded to this, but a lot of women are really hitting the cardio hard, the high intensity. When it comes to adrenal health, we really need balance throughout our cycle and throughout our life. And I really try to get patients to really focus more on, the somatic movements like yoga and Tai Chi and mobility and resistance training, strength training, and more functional movements instead of just thinking that we have to do high intensity cardio all the time, because that's not what our body likes.
Yeah, and I also think that breathing properly, nose breathing, since I'm an orofacial myologist and I do also teach people that, is super important because that can increase acidity in your body if you're not breathing right and also affect your cortisol. So that's really important. I agree with everything you said. I think that's wonderful. There's a lot more we can say on all those things. Okay, so moving on, we had mentioned that we work separately and we work together. I support women. I'm a health coach and an herbalist, and I support women who are dealing with cortisol issues, as well as other health-related issues that impact cortisol. And we do a lot of mind-body work, diet, nutrition, and energy work, and lots of ways to stabilize. I do have a class coming up. It's a free class where I dive deeper into cortisol. It is in person here, one in Durham and one is in Durham at the library. So it's on my page and anything. So if you guys want to do that. In addition, I have 3 spots open on my calendar. If you have some issues that you want to discuss further, you can always book a free call with me, and we can work it out together. And Mavis and I, as I said, work together. And Mavis, what do you do? How can
Yeah.
people connect with you?
Yes. So if you're interested in working one-on-one with me, you can always book a free call through the website, and we can discuss if this is the right fit for you. I also offer a lab shop for people that are not patients, which is a great way for people to get access to testing. So if any of the testing that we're talking about in these lives, you can access in the lab shop. And when you order through the lab shop, when I get the results, I will send you a password protected video interpretation of your results. And that's really helpful, right? Because that way it gives you insight into your body that you might not normally get in conventional medicine. I cannot give personalized protocols in that legally because you're not my patient, but it's a really good way to get insight into your health. And today, the Dutch adrenal test was the one I was referring to with the urine that looks at your curve and your metabolism. So that you can find in a lab shop, which you can find in the link in bio.
Great. And you can also do the testing. And if you need support in reaching your health goals, I can coach you through that, and you can get the testing from Mavis. So that's kind of how we collaborate on that end. And we're going to be together next Monday at 12 o'clock with another topic related to the heart and the gut. I forget what it is. And we look forward, what is it? Nervous system.
Yes.
Something with the nervous system. Stress.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It was so great to be with everybody today. And we will see you next Monday.
Yes. Everybody have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.